What we get from this idea of statism is that some people in a group called the government group, the parliament group, the Congress group, they have the right to say, issue taxes, a right that no other person or group of people have. The response to this is, well, it's legitimate because they got this right from the people. Okay, this is a fairly new concept in democracy, so we're already getting people to admit the vast majority of governments throughout history have been illegitimate. So, if I don't have the right to tax, how could I have delegated that right to Kirsten Sinema, the woman claiming to represent me in Washington, D.C.? If I don't have the right to force you to perform labor against your will for the greater good, allegedly, how did I delegate that right to a congressman? What we have here is not some people delegating their rights to others, as you would if you had an accountant, or if you had a lawyer, or if you had someone managing your store. What we simply have is some people trying to violently dominate others.
Three, two, one. All right, Mr. Keith Knight, welcome to the Renegades. How are you doing today? How are things going for you?
I'm doing fine, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Before we start off, if you could just give a brief introduction about yourself and give some context, that would be great.
My name is Keith Knight. I run the Don't Tread on Anyone show /podcast. I also work for the Libertarian Institute. I basically have a show that is designed for an introduction to the idea of statism and voluntarism. I try to make it so any of my episodes can individually be sent out to people interested in the ideas of freedom. Some are 2 minutes long, some are 4 hours long. I try to engage in historical analysis, economics, philosophy. I do a lot of interviews as well, along with foreign policy. So I try to do both deep dives and shallow dives to spread the idea of self-ownership, voluntary exchange, and the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic stuff, man. And really cool that, you're a young guy like myself. A lot of people are a little older, in their 40s, but we're both in our 20s, and that's awesome. I first found out about you, like I said, on Twitter through Anarchast, the Anarchast episode, and you were talking about something that I really related to, which was you basically became red-pilled and woke up and just realized that government is literally nothing but organized violence, right? And, that caused some tension with family, some tension with friends, and unfortunately, you oftentimes grow separate from some people, but you also gain a bunch of great friends that are ideologically aligned as well later on. Anyway, it's kind of a rant, but I respect the work you're doing. It's great to have you on. Two things that I'm thinking we discuss is just your perspective on the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist philosophy. How would you, talk to somebody about that? And then I also want to talk about Bitcoin. Do you have a preference of which one to start off with?
Well, we should probably do the philosophy first, because maybe Bitcoin is either a good or a bad thing, depending on what your philosophy is. So basically, anarcho-capitalism is the type of anarchism that I advocate. It is claiming one thing, anarchism, that no person has the right to rule or initiate violence against another. And the capitalism aspect is to distinguish it from early versions of anarchism, which were used by people like Emma Goldman, which advocated communism. The reason that philosophy is incorrect is because it doesn't recognize people's right to contract, nor does it recognize the private property ethic. So even if you and I are engaged in a mutually beneficial voluntary exchange, the communist says, well, I believe one party is exploiting the other, therefore this should not be allowed. And they are claiming to be the rulers in that situation. So as far as anarchism goes, only anarcho-capitalism is legitimate because it actually is a no rulers philosophy. As far as Libertarianism, a very specific term referring to the self-ownership principle with regard to others. People own their own bodies and have the right to pursue their happiness, which immediately would get us to the idea that, well, so what? Rapists, murderers, and thieves, they get to pursue their happiness at the expense of the rest of us. Well, there is one approach to the most amount of people getting what they want in society, and that is claiming that anyone can do whatever they please so long as they don't initiate fraud or violence against any peaceful person. This allows for people to harmoniously achieve their ends as opposed to a actual dog-eat-dog society of some people benefiting at the expense of others. The reason anarchism is correct and statism is not is anarchism, the free market voluntarism concept has one thing statism does not. That is the ability to voluntarily disassociate with bad actors and people you don't wish to associate with. It also doesn't have a moral double standard like the philosophy of statism. This is any belief in government, any belief in political authority, not necessarily any type of Ayn Rand is a authority with regard to objectivism. Leonard Peikoff is an authority with regard to National Socialism and collectivism. That's not what I'm talking about. With regard to authority, it's one person claiming the right to rule over another without that person's consent. If they have consent, then it's not rulership. So what we get from this idea of statism is that some people in a group called the government group, the parliament group, the Congress group, they have the right to say, issue taxes, a right that no other person or group of people have. The response to this is, well, it's legitimate because they got this right from the people. Okay, this is a fairly new concept in democracy, so we're already getting people to admit the vast majority of governments throughout history have been illegitimate. So if I don't have the right to tax, how could I have delegated that right to Kyrsten Sinema, the woman claiming to represent me in Washington, D.C.? If I don't have the right to force you to perform labor against your will for the greater good, allegedly, how did I delegate that right to a congressman? What we have here is not some people delegating their rights to others, as you would if you had an accountant, or if you had a lawyer, or if you had someone managing your store. What we simply have is some people trying to violently dominate others. So I don't say that as in I'm explaining this to you and your audience. What you would ask me is, what do I think, or I forget what you said, but how would I communicate those ideas? Sure. That is how I would do it. That's how I did it to the Uber driver who said she had never heard of voluntarism. She had just seen my bumper sticker when she picked me up. And I said, how would I describe this? She said she had never heard of it. And I said, well, it's similar to libertarianism. And she interrupts me and goes, what's that? And I go, wow, this is square one. I go,
yeah, this is learn.
I know. Oh, you're going to be really sorry really quick. I'm sure she's on disability now for the PTSD I caused her in the ride. But
sure.
Yeah, that is how I would explain it. So any questions on that before going into Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, you and I are obviously both in agreement there, but I just, to hammer that point down, there's no, if I were to go up to you and say, you need to pay me 30 to 50% of your income per year, and I need this in order to do something that you need, so this is for your own good, people would still call that a criminal act. And it's no different if I have a badge and a shirt that says IRS on it. It's no different. So yeah, and I think you have a great way of explaining that as well. There's really, they're very basic concepts too, very basic concepts that we're taught when we're 5, don't hit, don't steal. And that's exactly what the government does. And, somehow 330 million people in the US just, don't seem to have, a huge contention with it rather. Anyways, just so everybody knows, people who are listening, my power just went out. So my face is probably going to get darker and darker as the sun goes down, unfortunately. We're making it work on my computer. So Keith, again, I appreciate your patience. Let's jump into Bitcoin because time is limited. I've got probably about a half hour left on my battery. Are you for it? Are you against it? Thoughts on Bitcoin? Let's just start there.
I am strongly in favor of Bitcoin. The reason is simply because it's something that allows for. I'd have to think of the name. It's an alternative that does not exclude other alternatives. So it's not like, well, I support everyone going into Bitcoin, and that means no one can engage in the political process at all. Well, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's one possible alternative. 3D printers are a possible alternative. The Free State Project is an alternative. So Bitcoin is simply one of the many things. Tho Bishop is going into the Republican Party. That is something they're doing that is not necessarily at the expense of other things, because people can find their specialization in the division of labor, find what they're good at, and excel in those areas. So we have competing options with how to achieve the voluntary, rational society that I think we should all be aiming for. The reason that I really like Bitcoin was especially explained to me by a gentleman, Bird Archist, who was on a show called Timeline Earth, I believe is the name of the show. He really explained that the state is one group that tries to maintain a monopoly on a certain geographical area, and it has to be territorial. It has to say, here is where we rule. We, certain people, have the right to do things other people do not have the right to do. When you're dealing with things like cryptocurrency, you drastically increase the cost of enforcement. The idea that it's not possible, that it's impossible to enforce, I think is wrong, because you can have it. It's different to say they can't enforce it perfectly, which obviously they can't enforce anything perfectly.
Right. But to 6102 Bitcoin is effectively impossible. They can't do it like they did with the gold confiscation.
Sure, but they could imprison people for using Bitcoin, and that would, in effect, send messages to everyone else. I'm not using any of that stuff, so I'm just not going to. So that would be. I don't even understand it enough to know what they can or can't do behind the scenes with it. What they can do is have a show of force with regard to large Bitcoiners.
Yes. So I'd like to. Well, go ahead if you had a thought to finish, but I'd love to comment on that as well. Yeah.
Yes, I love Bitcoin as a possible alternative. Very common governments will use taxation to increase their amount of money, which in turn increases the power. But that directly affects people, so they're more likely to resist or move away. So what they do instead is they give one group of people in America, it's called the Federal Reserve Bank, established in 1913. And this gives them access to what Tom Woods likes to call the magic money printing machine. You don't actually print the dollars, but they can more or less digitally enter anything into bank accounts, and there's more or less no restriction. Again, the people telling us we need regulation and oversight advocate for things that have no regulation, no oversight, no checks and balances, and legally face no competition. Yep. It is illegal to do what they explicitly do.
Yep.
So that okay, so that's what they do in order to overcome the taxation hurdle. If they don't have a currency that is widely recognized, it would then be the equivalent of me trying to use casino chips from the early days of Las Vegas, from the Robert De Niro movie Casino, and say, I am the government, you have to trade with these, and people just laughing in my face and ignoring me. That would be the equivalent of what people could do with something like an alternative currency. Now, Peter Schiff thinks he's very hilarious in saying, well, the thing about Bitcoin is it has no inherent value. To which I have told him on 3 separate occasions in person, nothing has value, only people have values.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin and the US dollar does not have inherent value. Gold doesn't, guns don't, nothing does. Mises said this like 100 years ago.
He did.
Yep. And Schiff is just not appreciating. 3 times I said it right to his face, and he keeps saying it. So where the hell was I going with that? Well, so Schiff is unappreciative. Oh, okay. And then the final thing is, well, people say, well, I think it's going to fail. Well, The first Wright brothers plane failed miserably, but eventually they got something that's really, really cool and gives a lot of people something that they can increase their well-being with. So
Right.
maybe Bitcoin isn't the first crypto that's going to be terrific. Maybe there's going to be another one that improves on whatever the shortcomings may or may not be, or maybe it will be successful.
So
But
allow me
Bitcoin
to,
haters, I'm
yeah,
against.
allow me to get on that. So, and I think this is something you'll appreciate. In the theory of money and credit, Mises actually talks about, and I'm so happy that you, uh, Peter, yeah, first of all, Peter Schiff is totally wrong. You're right. Mises talks about how everything is, what we value things because we personally value them. There's not just an objective value, right? Everything is personal. So nothing has intrinsic value. I totally agree. Moving on to that, in the theory of money and credit, Mises talks about how ultimately, human beings, we don't want to transact in 10 different currencies. Ultimately, there's going to be one currency which outcompetes all others, and everybody agrees has value. Obviously, that hasn't happened in the last 50 to 100 years because governments have had monopolies on their currencies. So there hasn't been a free market ability for people to choose which currency that they want. And that's why the foreign exchange market is $5 trillion a day market. It's huge just on exchanging currencies. But getting to that, I mean, I would say my response to that would be, when you were saying that, okay, maybe Bitcoin could fail, but there's another cryptocurrency that could come out. My response is, it's actually been tried before. Hashcash was one online currency, that failed. There was Eagle. There have been many others for the past 20 years, really, before this. And then Bitcoin came out, and we have proof of work, SHA-256, all of these innovations that had never happened before. And Bitcoin is the first of its kind. Every other cryptocurrency past that really is not doing anything different in that regard. And so my second point on that would also be network effect, right? You have Robert Metcalfe. He was the creator of Ethernet, and there's, Metcalfe's law, which is basically the idea that the more users a network has, the more valuable it is. So, if nobody was using Facebook, it wouldn't have that much value, but it's so valuable because, they have, 3 billion people on it, something like that, 3 billion people. Same thing with Bitcoin. I mean, ultimately, we have one currency, which is about $700 billion in market cap. We have a country on the Bitcoin standard right now, El Salvador. We have corporations buying it. We have MicroStrategy, Tesla, Square, tons of other corporations that are buying it. And I only picture this path continuing. You know what I mean? I can't picture something replacing Bitcoin at this point. Curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't picture people, obeying lockdown orders, but that happened. So I have no clue what the future holds. It would have been really hard to predict, the existence of this microphone 100 years ago, or the laptop that I'm working on. I'm just so ignorant with regard to these things. I mean, I don't know how this pen is made. Literally, I have no clue how the ink comes out and how it's structured. So for me to say, well, what's going to happen in the cryptocurrency market 100 years from now is that's just a lie. I love the idea. I love the concept that it increases costs of enforcement, therefore decreasing the likelihood of authorities being able to get their hands on it. It also allows people to engage in the counter economy. It builds camaraderie amongst people who tend to be anti-state or even skeptical of centers of power. So on net, very pro Bitcoin and very appreciative of Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good question to ask is, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I consider you somebody that, obviously totally understands liberty and Austrian economics, and Bitcoin, and the two are merged. How could something replace, I mean, theoretically, how could something replace Bitcoin? Because here's the thing with network effect. if you were to go to people that have cryptocurrency, more likely than not, they will all have Bitcoin, but they may not have, another cryptocurrency that, they may not have Uniswap or whatever.
They may not have Doge yet.
They may not have Doge. Yeah.
It's possible. There's still people out there without Doge, from what I hear. Yeah, how would something replace it? Well, in order to increase the mass consumption, you would have to lower the cost of people's ability to access it. So maybe you would have people download an app and you'd get a Super Bowl commercial, and everyone would automatically start with 500 of these things, similar to what you could do on Library or Minds with their token programs. And if you watch a video once every 24 hours, you get a denomination of the cryptocurrency. If you follow other people, then you get a little more. So it would be anyone who's willing to or who's able to drastically lower the cost of people consuming these things. You also get dopamine hits every time. There's a nice little thing that buzzes. You earned 5 library credits by simply clicking on this. You're like, oh God, what else do I got to do? I don't even know what I'm going to do with these things, but I keep getting them. Just as people in the marketing industry know what makes you click and what makes you back off, there could be another cryptocurrency like that simply makes it more user-friendly, engages in vocabulary that allows people who are much more closer to the layman's understanding of how to use phones, computers, the internet, etc. Maybe that could replace it. Well, or maybe not. Or
yeah,
maybe
here's the thing. If it's a matter of getting airdrop, I totally agree. I mean, there is a dopamine hit, once you get like free, I use Brave, and that's kind of cool. I get $20 eventually after a long time of using them. But again, I mean, I guess the contention would be, okay, even if you have this one cryptocurrency that maybe more people can get for free that are using a certain platform, how can, one solidified group overtake Bitcoin, which again has corporate adoption, an entire country is using it at this point. The other thing you have to ask too is, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with Bitcoin maximalism and like that sort of school of thought. Basically the idea that Bitcoin will be the one, and no other coin can compete with it eventually. The thing with Bitcoin that's very unique is you can do something called running a node. And what a node is it audits the supply of the amount of Bitcoin in circulation. It, enforces the rules of the network. And if you go on, I believe it's crypto51attack.com or .org, you can see what's called the hash rate of Bitcoin compared to any other currency. And it is ridiculously high compared to the other ones. For those listening that don't know, hash rate is basically what secures the Bitcoin network. And nodes, you basically, in order to kill Bitcoin, you would have to do one of two things. You would have to turn off the internet globally simultaneously, which I would venture to say is impossible at this point, or you would have to go around worldwide and destroy each copy of these nodes, which have a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. And there are anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 nodes that exist all around the world for Bitcoin. So as far as its security, as far as how easy it is to audit the supply, I believe that Bitcoin, takes the win on that one, because even people with Ethereum, nobody who has Ethereum knows how to run a node or actually check the supply themselves, which I think is kind of a, big advantage with Bitcoin. Kind of a rant, kind of technical. Curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I love that there are people like you very educated in the field, because I think it's great. It's a great area for us to specialize in. Of course, with regard to something like money and roads and regulation, people will say, well, without government, how would we have money or roads or regulation? Because all we know is the state monopolizing these things, even though we also say that we need a state to protect us from monopolies. It somehow doesn't count when the state openly engages in monopoly. The best example of this is they're always saying, Well, we need antitrust regulation to stop companies from engaging in price fixing, because sometimes they'll get together and they'll charge the same thing to avoid competition. And then the other day, Jake Sullivan, foreign policy advisor to Joe Biden, openly comes out and says that we, the USA, are leading the charge in there being a global minimum tax. So all the countries are going to be on the same page, and at least we're going to have 5%, 10%, 15% taxes on the corporation, so they pay their fair share. Of course, they don't open up with, we're going to tax your grandma. They start with the evil people. They don't say, we're going to torture Julian Assange and journalists. They say, we're going to get the towel heads who did 9/11 by torturing. And then it moves on to Julian Assange. So, again, blatant double standards that people have. And the one way to do this is convince people the state and their monopolies are illegitimate. The other is to simply go around them, create an alternative that's more attractive with things like Bitcoin, and people flock to those instead. There is, a big argument about there was never really a big change in people's mood, like from one day to another on slavery. It was really, the cotton engine and all these innovations that made slavery less profitable. And then they were able to get rid of it without mass revolt. Same with child labor. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but it's possible. Therefore, Bitcoin increases the possibility that we'll have people going to alternatives and nullifying the necessity of the state in people's minds. Of course, it's never necessary in anything.
Yeah, I exactly. I mean, Ron Paul has been saying this for a very long time. We should at least have competing currencies. We shouldn't have a monopoly on currency. And what a beautiful thing. I mean, up until Bitcoin came out, human beings did not have an option to opt out of the money with all seeing eyes on it. And now we do, which is really cool.
And the new currency on The Economist, on their the front of The Economist, has the all-seeing eye on it. Did you see that?
The GovCoin one?
Yeah, it was something like time for a world currency on the front of The Economist.
Oh, yes. That was, go ahead. That was from the 80s, I believe.
No. This is a new one. They're doing it again with that same image. I can send it to you when your computer isn't dying before our eyes.
Okay, I would love to see that.
I don't want to lose this recording, but of course I will send it to your Twitter account.
Okay. All right. Well, I just so everybody knows, I have probably about 7 minutes left on my computer. Just wish I had electricity to plug it in, but it would be great to have you on at some point in the future, and we can have more of a thorough conversation. But yeah, Keith, I think you're doing really good things for the world, man. It's great to see another young guy, putting great content out there, educational content that is compelling and convincing, can actually help people understand the philosophy of freedom. And just to address that last point on Bitcoin, I mean, human beings, you brought up a good point. Slavery, there wasn't one moment where it just clicked. People realized, okay, we're not in slavery anymore. Slavery is bad. It was a gradual thing. And if we can just create incentives for people to opt out of these government monopolies, maybe even FedEx instead of USPS, naturally, the free market will dominate. So just a great perspective on that related to Bitcoin. So
of course, man. Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Right before we go, we have a little time. If you could just repeat how we could get in contact with you and your channel, that would be awesome.
So I would ask people, I got a number of strikes on YouTube. I just got another one yesterday.
Good for you.
So check out odyssey.com. Keith Knight, don't tread on anyone. Of course, follow me on YouTube if it's easier, but please go to those backups. I'm also on minds.com. At Keith Knight, don't tread on anyone. Those are the two best alt media. Of course, BitChute, archive.org, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Of course, I'm there, but please sub to those backups. This way, when the inevitable takedown happens, I'm not left without a paddle.
Awesome. Very good. Glad to hear you have backup, and you're doing something right if you're getting strikes. So you're doing some good stuff.
Yeah, really. Go check out the banned video that I just put up like 5 hours ago, with James Perloff. Yeah, it was part 2 of our conversation.
Okay, I will check that. I believe I saw that earlier. 5 reasons, 5 something, right?
No, that one they kept up. It was the second one. It was part 2 of that discussion. That's why I had to cut it short.
Okay, awesome, very good. It was great to have you on, man. Cheers.
Take care.